Okay, we have a brand new piece of software we'd like to show you now. It's called AccuPad. It's available for AccuTrack 2015 and AccuSQL 2015. AccuPad is designed to run on a tablet such as an HP Stream that I'm showing here in my meeting. Through the various centers that are running our software, we discovered that we had a gap, whereas tutors would be all grouped inside of a center, in a tutoring center, and then they would go station to station helping students. But it was difficult then to collect the sign-ins and information on those visits when there are roaming tutors walking around the center. Hence, we developed AccuPad. This is made to run on a tablet or a notebook where the tutors then carry the device around with them, and they can visit with the student, have the sessions, and then perform various things such as scheduling appointments, entering session notes, etc. So in this video, I'm going to take you through installing the AccuPad on an HP Stream here, which I'm showing in my meeting. I'll show you how it opens up to a default database that you can go play with, and then ultimately how you would point it to the database that you want to use with the device. Okay, so I'll do AccuPad SQL here. Go ahead and run the installer. And I can do that just by launching setup.exe. Okay, and I'll click Next. And it will immediately start to install. It'll say that it's signed by Engineering Systems, so click Yes to continue, and it'll install the software. Okay, so once that finishes, there's a checkbox that will be selected that says Launch the program. So if you click Finish, it will open AccuPad. And it'll copy some files out the first time. What it's doing is creating a sample database out in the public folder, and it creates a db/param file that stores the path to the database. Ultimately, we need that to store the location where your data resides. But here I am in the default mode. It's just pointing to a tutoring sample database right from its public users folder. But I'll go ahead and log in here now to AccuPad. Now, if you'd like to log in yourself once the software is installed, the user ID you can use for a tutor is 000555555. Okay, the password is going to be exactly the same thing, 000555555. Now I'll click Done, and now I'm logged into my AccuPad, again pointing to a tutoring sample database running right from my HP Stream in this case. Okay, now I don't have a waiting list set up yet. A waiting list is an intake system you may have seen in AccuTrack where students sign in and then they wait in line until they're called by the tutor or advisor. So I would have to show you where to set that up in a moment using set data path. But now I can manually sign a student in. So I'll tap Sign In Student, and it will give me a list of the students in my sample database. I can tap on Sign In ID, for example, to go find the exact ID I'm looking for. So there's Dan Arlington. I'm going to click OK here, and then I'm going to sign him into, again, a sample set of categories and activities. So I'll just pick course tutoring, for example. And again, I'm just tapping on what I'd like. Tap OK, and then I'll pick the course that I'm helping him with as Cindy Bright, the tutor in this case. Tap OK, pick the professor. Now, again, you can turn these on or off, but in the sample, I'm having them pick their professor. And then a service type, which obviously is also optional. So now it shows Dan Arlington is signing in for course tutoring Anatomy and Physiology 1 with Wendy Holland for required hours. I tap OK, and now the student is signed in. Okay, once that student is signed in, it will automatically go to my signed in window. So I'm seeing Dan here signed in with me, Cindy Bright, the tutor. And I can do various things. Obviously, I can sign him out once I'm done, but I can manage the session while it's occurring. So I'll tap Manage here. And for example, if I tap Open Session Log, I can enter session notes as the event is happening. So I'll save my comments now. And now I've entered a session note while it's occurring with Dan in this case. If I close that, I can go back to my other management options. So things like create an appointment for the student, edit the sign-in log for the student, view any appointments, or then sign the student out. So I'll tap Create Appointment, for example. And now while I'm having the session here with Dan Arlington, I'm scheduling some follow-up time with him. So I would click Course Tutoring, for example. Let's continue with Anatomy and Physiology. Do OK. And now it's going to automatically default to me, Cindy Bright. That's who I'm signed in with my 0005555. But I can change who the appointment is with just by tapping on a different tutor, for example. But I'll stay with Cindy in this case. I can scroll down to see the open slots where Cindy is available. I can click the right or left arrow to change the days that the appointment is going to happen. So you see it's Tuesday, Wednesday. Let's say I'd like a Wednesday 10 o'clock with Dan Arlington. So I'll just Cindy Bright select it. I'll tap 10 a.m. here. It will light up my Set Appointment button. I'll click that. And now I'm looking at the appointment information. I can change the duration. Again, this is set based on your appointment rules. So what is the minimum, maximum period of the appointment? All of that is stored in your AccuTrack or AccuSQL database. I can put a note if I'd like to. And then I'll click Schedule. Okay, it's recording that appointment, emailing enabled recipients, and now that appointment has been scheduled from my AccuPad with Cindy and Dan Arlington on Wednesday at 10 a.m. I'm done. I can close that, and then I can view the appointments that I've set here. So there's the appointment. If that's too small for me, I can tap that A few times and make it bigger. But now I'm looking at that appointment that I just scheduled, Cindy Bright, the tutor, and Dan Arlington, the student. Okay, once I'm done working with Dan Arlington in this case, I'll tap Sign Student Out. It confirms that indeed I want to do that, and now the student is signed out successfully, and I'm ready to walk around with my device and sit down with the next student and do the same thing. Now I continue to be in the tutoring sample database, so let's go ahead and change this to a real database. I'm going to go ahead and exit AccuPad. Okay, and in this case I'm going to go where the folder where AccuPad SQL is installed. You do the same thing for AccuTrack. Open file location. Okay, and in here I have another little program I can run called AP Set Data Path. Okay, what that does for me is enables me to set my data location to where I want it to be. If it's a SQL server, I would enter that information. If it's an AccuTrack shared database, I would enter that information. Now, by the way, this is a brand new install on this, and it's SQL, so I do need to install the SQL driver in order to connect to my SQL Server database. Now what I've done is gone right to the folder where it's installed, and I have a folder here. It's kind of hard to see, but it's called SQL_drivers. And then I have an installer for that SQL driver. One is SQL and CLI right here. That's for a 32-bit PC. So if you don't have a program files x86 folder, for example, yours is likely a 32-bit or a 64-bit. Now if I look here and I see program files, but I don't have program files x86. So that indicates to me that this is a 32-bit tablet I'm running on. So I'll go ahead and install this. And I can just accept the defaults. And I don't need the SDK, so I'll just click Next. And then install. So this is installing my native connectivity client to my SQL Server. If this is not installed, by the way, and you try to connect to a SQL Server database, it will give you an OLE dispatch provider not found error, so you'll know you haven't installed it yet. Okay, but now I have that installed. I'm going to go back a level here. And then I'm going to run my AP set data path. AP for AccuPad set data path. So let's double click and open that. Okay, now it tells me native or SQL Server. If I'm using AccuTrack AccuPad, I would always pick native. When I do that, I would tap Next, and it has a data path. So I would go put the data path, the UNC path, which would be / server name / AccuFiles / AccuData, for example. If I have it mapped to a drive letter, it could be Z : /AccuFiles / AccuData. So wherever that data is stored on your server, you would enter that information. If it's SQL Server, I would pick SQL Server mode, and then I would put the information to my SQL Server, which I can do real quickly here. Okay, so I'm using a port here, 60558 on mine, so that's why it's set up that way. You may or may not have that port defined. I'm going to pick SQL Server Authentication from my drop-down. And then I would typically put an AccuTrack or a public account here. I don't know if I have one, so I'll just use the SA account because I know that'll be good. And then from the drop-down box, I should be able to get a list of my databases out there on my ENG server. And that may take a second to populate. If I have my credentials or path wrong, it would come back and say it can't find the path. Now, by the way, I don't have to pick the database right out of the box here. I can test my connection currently just to make sure all my credentials are right. And it says that it did indeed connect successfully. So now I'll pick my drop-down and pick my database. Now you may have to double tap that drop-down if you're not getting any results, and also it does take a little bit. So I double tapped it there to open up all the databases on that server. So I'll pick my AccuSQL 13 testing here. Okay, now also in SQL Server, you'll see at the top it says Application Shared Path. Now that would be a shared folder out on a server somewhere. It's not where the database is. It's a shared folder that you point the various devices to if you want to use things like intake system or waiting list. So there can be different intake systems for different areas. So you would want to set a shared path to everyone. So long story short, if you're using the intake system or the waiting list feature and you're not seeing people being populated in that intake system on the various devices, then you need to set the same application shared path for all of those various devices. So that way they can share that intake queue, if you will. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I'll do a select path. And I went ahead and double tapped that actually. A single tap didn't seem to get there. So I double tap that and then it'll open up my folder list. Okay, so now I have a Z drive in this case. If I had a UNC path, I could just type it directly in my application shared path. But I have a Z drive here. And on my Z drive, I have an Accu Files shared folder. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to that, and then save. It says connection information saved. Okay, now I can X out of this completely. So, but now I've set my data path to my SQL Server database, and I'm ready to start using AccuPad SQL actually in SQL Server mode. So now I double tap again, and it's ready for me to log in. Now I know I'm on a different database because that one didn't mask my ID settings, and that's a setting at the database level. But just to be sure, what I'm going to do here is go ahead and open the file location for AccuSQL, and let's run a set data path and see if what this one's pointing to for a database. Using the same database, AccuSQL 13 testing to that Z Accu Files, I think it was. So let's go ahead and select that same path. I think it was Z Accu Files, if I recall correctly. And I'll click OK, test my connection if I'd like, save. Okay, so now I'm ready to go here. But I need to turn my intake system on AccuSQL 2015 just because I want to sign some students into my intake system and then see if they'll populate in my AccuPad. Okay, now we're going to sign a couple of students in and put them in the intake system. So just enter a few IDs here. Here comes Laura for Biology 1, let's say. And we'll sign in with Tom Hanks is fine. And now Laura's in line with Tom Hanks. We're waiting for Tom Hanks, I should say. We'll take a math class, let's say college algebra, and I'll pick Cindy Bright. Now remember, Cindy Bright's who I'm signed in on the AccuPad with. Okay, let's do one more just for fun. And we'll put another one in with Cindy here. Okay, so I have two in with waiting for Cindy, and I have one waiting for Tom. Now let's go ahead and exit AccuTrack, or I don't have to, I can just minimize it either way. We'll go ahead and minimize it to get it out of the way. Now I'm looking back at my stream here, and let's see the waiting list. Okay, and there we go. So I see two students waiting. If I scroll over a little, or I don't even have to scroll over, I'm sorry, it's tutor Cindy Bright is that third column. So those are the two that I just signed in for Cindy Bright back on my AccuSQL station. But if I tap all students, then I can see the two students waiting for me and the student waiting for Tom Hanks. So that's a quick way to see people waiting for me or all people waiting. And then I can pick them right off the list. You can see I've got sign in, remove from line, or manage. So let's go ahead and sign in Nick, for example, the middle one. Right on the left, I'll just tap Nick and then tap sign in. And this list will auto-refresh too. But I just signed Nick in, now I'm ready to manage him. I go through that same process, enter session notes, create an appointment, edit logs if I want to, whatever I want to do here through my pad. But once I'm done with Nick, I can sign him out. Now, if I haven't taken any notes for Nick yet, it's going to ask me, it says student signed out successfully, do you want to edit the session log? Well, I'll say sure. When I do that, then it'll automatically pop open the session log in edit mode where I can enter my notes. Save the comments, then I can close this. It's also showing me all the sign-outs, the sign-ins and sign-outs with Nick. But now I can go back to my waiting list. I've finished my session with Nick. I can then tap my waiting list and go pick somebody else off the list and go help them and continue the process. Okay, so that's a brief overview of AccuPad. If you have any questions about setting it up or using it, you can certainly contact us here. Also, if you view our newsletter, we've got some information about where you can beta test AccuPad for us. It's not officially released yet, but we'd love to get your input on it. Also, you can contact us here at support@AccuTrack, AccuTrack.org if you would like to test out the AccuPad. Now again, you would need to have AccuTrack 2015 or AccuSQL 2015 running in order, or at least that database, in order for this to work, as it is designed for a 2015 database. Okay, thank you for your attention.